Welcome to the Roommate Coach. I'm Mark Lynn. I'll be your host here on KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. Our motto here at the Roommate Coach is World Peace, one roommate at a time. Last time we started talking about a new roommate or new roommates and how to get things started to increase the chances of everybody getting along reasonably well and getting pretty much what they're hoping to get out of the situation, minimize problems and conflicts. Notice I say minimize, I don't say eliminate entirely, because that's unrealistic. And if there's one thing we really try to be here at the Roommate Coach, it's realistic. No phony promises or instant cures or any of that stuff. But this will be part 2 of the new roommate, continuing where we left off last time. Just for a quick recap, the things we talked about last time were probably the most important thing of all, as far as starting off or getting off to a good start, is establishing as much goodwill as possible. That everything that you might suggest to your roommate or roommates that you try to do, that you want them to realize that your motivation is so that things wind up working well for everyone, that you're not just trying to feather your own nest and the heck with them. So goodwill is probably number one. The next topic, closely related to goodwill, or to be most definitely presented with goodwill, is why not start out by acknowledging the fact that roommates frequently do have trouble. Maybe they don't want to, but it does happen. So just sort of taking the bull by the horns and talking about things that might go wrong. And again, with goodwill and well-intention. And now along these lines, my third topic was adding a little humor to the situation. This is something that maybe not everyone would be comfortable with. And again, with goodwill, there's no reason to push anything. If someone doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But kind of possibly a fun way and a lighthearted way, and at the same time a good way to get some stuff out there would be to just sort of tongue-in-cheek say, well, why don't we just go around and take turns talking about how we might louse this thing up. And again, goodwill, humor. The idea is to get kind of comfortable with being realistic about our own. We all have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. Everybody's got little habits and things that can wind up annoying others around them. So rather than hide from that fact and just let it come out in its own way and make all kinds of trouble, which is traditionally what tends to happen, in the name of being proactive, I guess what I'm saying here is, why not just sort of talk about it? Say, yeah, well, I am kind of messy, and I might bug you guys, or someone else might say, I tend to be forgetful, and if I'm not careful, I might forget about something like the phone bill or something. But if you get stuff out there like that, there's a better chance of maybe heading it off and doing something about it before it becomes a big deal. And once again, with as much goodwill and humor, it can help. So that was kind of a brief rundown of the last version, and now we'll take it up from there with some more things that you might do at the beginning of a roommate relationship and maybe increase the chances of things going reasonably well. One of the biggest issues or potential problems among people spending time together, not just roommates, really any time where people are spending regular time together, co-workers, friends, family, roommates, astronauts, is communication. Communication and the lack of it, I should say. And what I have today is an exercise that I learned years ago that can help. I think especially early on, if you could sort of work this kind of a thing into your routine, it might help. And it can help in a couple of different directions. The funny thing about communication is it can be a problem in two ways. The more obvious, I guess, is when you don't know that something you're doing is bothering someone else, and then you keep doing it because they don't want to tell you, because we like to avoid confrontation, since in many cases it goes badly, which is part of why I'm talking about all this, is to try to help us figure out ways for it not to go badly. But lack of communication can be a problem in the other direction as well, because sometimes someone's doing something that you really like, and if you don't tell them, then they don't know it, and vice versa. So the exercise is designed to help with both of those, to just make ongoing, regular, non-confrontational communication, that's really a mouthful, to make that be, to let that, I should say, be kind of a regular, ongoing part of the daily routine. It's a pretty simple exercise, and initially I'll explain it for two people, although it would be easily modified for more. All you do, and it probably helps if you do it at around the same time every day. Toward the end of the day is probably best, but not crucial. All you do is you take turns telling each other 3 things that happened that day that you didn't like, 3 things that bothered you for whatever reason, and 3 things that you did like, 3 things that the other person did that you really liked. Now here's the crucial part of it. The other person doesn't argue or complain. All the other person does is acknowledge that they heard what you said. It might be completely inaccurate what you said. It doesn't matter. All they do is they just acknowledge that they heard it. And here's how it goes. And again, we can modify this depending on your preferences and everything, but this is the way I learned the exercise. So let's say it's your turn to go first, and the first thing that occurs to you is you really didn't care for the way the kitchen was when you went to make your lunch. So you might say, I really didn't like it when I went to have lunch and the kitchen was really a mess. And the other person, and again, this is the important part, the person on the receiving end of these various comments, all they get to say is, thank you for letting me know. Now, it's going to be really tempting to, in some cases, it'll be tempting for the person to argue or deny or make excuses or something. And by the way, it probably helps when the person, especially for the negative side of it, the positive side is easier, obviously, but you don't want to go overboard, and you don't want to, we can get into fair fighting and discussions of how to express problems later on, but you don't want to go overboard with any implications or name calling or anything like that. Just stick to the facts, whatever it was that took place that bothered you. Like I said, I really didn't like it when the kitchen was a mess when I went to make my lunch. The other person says, thank you for letting me know. Then you go back and you come up with a couple more things, and most of the time you probably won't have trouble coming up with 3 things that bothered you during the day. Maybe you will. That would be good. So you finish that, and then you trade places. The other person takes their turn. They come up with, I really didn't like it when you left the door open and my cat almost got out, let's say. And then you say, thank you for letting me know. That's all you say. You don't say anything else. And then they come up with 2 more. And again, I guess if there were more than 2 of you, I guess it really wouldn't matter. You could just take turns, just go around in the circle, in the group. But when you finish with the 3 negatives, then it's time for the positives. Then you do the same thing, except now it's things that you liked. You might say, I really liked it when you came in late, and it seemed like you made an effort to not disturb me because I slept through the whole night, and I really appreciate that. And the other person says, thank you for letting me know. Same rules apply, whether it's positive or negative. All they say is basically they heard it. They don't embellish. They don't add anything on. They don't argue or anything at all. And then you do that with three more, and that's it. That's it. And I guess it's pretty obvious, it should be obvious, that the whole idea here is to establish the habit and the pattern of the ability to just let each other know things that are going on, both negative and positive, and without a lot of commotion or defensiveness or anything else. And it's surprising how much difference that can make, just having that ability to just simply acknowledge things. Communication's important. There's no two ways about it. You're listening to The Roommate Coach. This episode is New Roommate Part 2. My name is Mark Lynn. This is KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. Station KZZH has been brought to the air by the nice folks at Access Humboldt. You can reach Access Humboldt at accesshumboldt.net. If you want to leave me any comment, feedback, criticism, praise, whatever, you could reach me at theroommatecoach.com. There's a contact link on the homepage. You could also leave a voicemail for me at area 707-362-8000. Well, it's probably a pretty good time to repeat some of my ongoing disclaimers. I like to remind people that I do think that the things I'm describing here can help. In fact, I know they can help. I've used them myself in many of my dealings with others over the years, and they certainly help. They don't necessarily, in fact, probably don't produce immediate results. We are all creatures of habit, and habits take a while to form, and they take a while to unform and reform. So it's important to approach this whole topic with a certain amount of patience. Like I say, whatever problems may be occurring among you and your roommates, if there are any, probably didn't happen overnight, and they probably won't unhappen overnight. Now that requires a little bit of exploration, because you could easily contradict me. I mean, you could, on the very first day you meet with people, you could immediately start having problems. So you could say, well, guess what, roommate coach, you're mistaken. We just met and we're already having trouble. So they did happen overnight. Well, my point for this situation would be that whatever habits and attitudes and ways of doing things that the individuals involved brought to the new roommate situation, those did not get formed overnight. They might have taken years to form. And it could be that some of those will need to change, at least somewhat, for the roommate relationship to work better. So that's my explanation for what seems like a contradiction there. Okay, back to my list of things to do, things to try to accomplish early on with new roommates to get things going well. And the final thing I'll talk about today on my list is it's a multi-part thing. The goal here is to whatever extent possible, you want to establish the idea among yourself and your roommates that you're going to be allies for each other. It's a difficult world in a lot of ways, and you're sharing a home, and if your home is your castle, then by definition, the people you share your home with should be on your side. So I like the phrase of becoming allies. Now I'll break that down into a couple of 2 or 3 subtopics of things that you can endeavor to do. And I guess what I'm saying here is talk about this, is just discuss this whole idea of being allies for each other. Now that actually brings to mind a whole different topic, which would be setting up the idea of having regular, just free-form talks about this kind of a thing. That's probably a good idea in itself. That's kind of, I guess, kind of implied by everything else I'm saying here. Probably should have stated that explicitly as part of the list. So consider that on the list. Agree, or at least discuss the idea of having regular talks about how you're all doing with each other. Kind of an expansion on the exercise I mentioned a few minutes ago. But as far as getting the ally thing as becoming allies, what does that translate to? One thing would be finding common ground, just doing whatever you can to establish what you might have in common with each other. In many cases, if we don't talk to each other, we may have some pretty important interests or passions or some kind of strong likes or dislikes or something relatively important. I remember I think it was Gail Sheehy who wrote a book called Passages a number of years ago. She talked about a couple whose love was based on shared convictions. I always liked that phrase. So finding out about each other and talking to each other, listening to each other, that brings me right into an additional subtopic here, which is visibility, psychological visibility, seeing each other clearly and being seen by each other. Now, this, again, is one of those things that our culture kind of works against, especially for the males among us. I think that females are a little more inclined to be open with each other. The cultural thing for the male stereotype is to be strong and stoic and strong and silent and all that stuff. Of course, if you go through life without anyone seeing who you really are, then no one ever gets to really know you. I remember years ago somebody said the only thing worse than being vulnerable is being invulnerable. So letting each other see what you like and what you don't like and what's important to you and what's not important to you, it all goes along with visibility, and it gives you an opportunity to find what you have in common with each other, which is a really good way to form alliances. The stronger, the better. And one more thing I will add to my sub list here of becoming allies is, I mentioned it briefly earlier, is tolerance. It's kind of a fine line. It's tricky, and again, this is why communication and open and honest communication is so important, because tolerance is difficult. If something is really driving you crazy, you might want to just lash out and make the bad noise stop, as the old comic strip said. But if you can keep the big picture in mind, and here's why it's so important to maintain the ally thing, is if the people involved are already important to you and you've come to kind of care about each other, you'll all be more likely, again, nothing's 100%, but you'll be more likely to approach each other with a little bit of goodwill when something comes up. And maybe you can meet somebody halfway, and maybe in return they will meet you halfway. So this would all be tolerance. And again, there's no cut and dried, hard, fast rule. You can't say exactly what that means until the situation comes up. But when the situation does come up, and no question, situations do arise because we're all complicated creatures and we're going to bug each other. That's just part of the complex thing that's a human being. So that would be my final sub-list for now. Nothing's final. There's always something new. But whatever you can, do whatever you can to maintain the tolerance. Another quote I heard many years ago I really liked. It said something about friendship is in some ways maybe even every bit as strong as love because, no, I'm saying it wrong. It was tolerance. The bottom line was friendship is so much more tolerant than love. And it was, the quote was extolling the virtues of friendship, which I heartily agree with that whole sentiment. Okay, that's going to wrap things up here for episode 4 of The Roommate Coach. This episode was part 2 of new roommates and things you can do to get things off to a really great start. I'm Mark Lynn, and this is KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. You can reach me for feedback, questions, concerns at theroommatecoach.com using the contact link on the front page. And you can also leave a voicemail 24/7 at area 707-362-8000. I'd like to again thank Access Humboldt, accesshumboldt.net, for bringing KZZH onto the air here in Eureka and for giving me the opportunity to present my thoughts as the roommate coach. Also thank Kevin MacLeod for creating the really nice bumper music in the background, which is called Rollin' at 5. Thanks a lot for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.